Well, hello there, and welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Only it's just Debbie today. I'm Debbie Georgiani, co-host of Take Two, and this is your show where normally you call in. It's a live call-in platform for you to share your lived experiences where we learn and grow together. But today is a special pre-recorded broadcast, so no phone calls today. We have a great guest with us, and he's going to share his real life journey, life amidst the storm, suffering, surrender, and joy. And we're going to dive right in, but we need you to sit back and really listen and learn. Jerry will be back on our next live broadcast, but just really, absorb it all, folks. Just soak it in and then share this broadcast, share this episode with a friend, please, because we need to trust more. We need to trust God more than the storm we are facing, right? And we talk about it all the time on Take Two. So I'm going to go right into the interview because I think when you hear his story, his journey, it will inspire you. It will allow you to understand things better about life in general and also about what we just said, suffering and surrender and joy. So Chris Faddis is our guest today on Take Two. And let me give you a little background about Chris, and then we will chat with him. Chris Faddis is a visionary author and motivational speaker, renowned for his impactful work in the realm of personal development and spiritual growth. Chris is co-founder and president of Solidarity HealthShare, a national not-for-profit ministry that provides an alternative way to fund healthcare costs while protecting and practicing Catholic beliefs. He is also the author of this wonderful book, It Is Well, Life in the Storm, a story that chronicles the inspirational journey he shared with his late wife, Angela, as she battled colon cancer. Chris is married to Jennifer, and they have 5 children. Chris, thank you for being with us and Take Two. Take Two family loves you. You've been a guest on previous episodes, and we're just so grateful you could make this time for us.
I'm really grateful to talk to you again, Debbie. It's great to hear your voice.
Yeah, this is, Chris, I know your story. I've heard it shared many times. The book is amazing. The book came out about 10 years ago, I believe, and it's a phenomenal book. But you talk about your journey with Angela, her illness, her eventually she did die, and you talk about now your life after Angela. So go back if you can, Chris, for our listeners, because we cover the good, the bad, and the ugly on Take Two. That's what Take Two is all about. That's the way we roll here. We want the real, raw truth. And Chris, we very rarely have guests on our programs, and these special recorded new content broadcasts are meant especially for our listeners to understand things in a very deep and personal way with all the details. So no pressure, Chris, but let's go all the way back. Tell us tell us about Angela, and don't hold back, because we need to know everything.
Yeah. No, and Debbie, I appreciate that. I think in these times we all need these reminders of what, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but ultimately the good and the bad and the ugly ultimately are all God's grace. They're all God's beauty and His glory. And sometimes when we're in the middle of it, it's really hard to remember that. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this, because I think it's so important for us, like you said, to face suffering, to accept suffering, to embrace suffering. Even the readings, the gospel reading this Sunday was, this idea of taking up our cross, right, and accepting it in such a way that we allow God to work. And I think, one of the greatest gifts of my marriage to Angela for me was watching this woman become so powerful in her weakness through God's grace. Angela and I were married on July 1st, 2006. We were madly in love. We loved each other so much. We were it felt so fairy tale in a lot of ways. But we also both had our own personal sufferings, and a big part of the beauty of our relationship was that very early on, the Lord allowed us to comfort each other in those sufferings and encourage each other in those sufferings. And we got married with those things in mind. But, after we got married, not long later, I learned more about Angela's suffering of depression. And we spent a lot of our years of marriage with her going in and out of different periods of depression, and also some very difficult family situations that she had in her life that I didn't fully understand until after we were married. But then it kind of faced us pretty quickly after that. And, we had many times in our marriage to really just rely and trust on God to get us through difficult times. At the same time, we went through some difficult financial times, losing a job and being, not living at home, being kind of far away from home and having to figure out how to for me, how to make ends meet for my wife and our one daughter. All of these things were going on in the first few years of our marriage. But meanwhile, the Lord was proving us in our trust. Throughout each of those periods, God would call us deeper and deeper into relationship with Him, but also in relationship with each other. And, I remember a period of time, Debbie, when we were living in another city and looking for work. We were going to Mass twice a day just to get enough grace to get through, and it was drawing us closer together, even as painful as it was. And then things started to get better. I got a job in North Carolina. We were liking where we were. We were happy, but her depression just continued to get deeper and deeper. And for 2 years, I watched Angela battle depression. And shortly, in 2011, right at the beginning of the year, she finally found a doctor who figured out what was wrong, and there was actually a nutritional deficiency that she had. And they immediately changed her diet, did some things with her to help her. And I saw a change in her within 24 to 72 hours. And
Wow.
all of a sudden, we saw this depression lift, and she felt like she was young again, and for us, it was like a honeymoon period because we had faced so much trial right away in our marriage that we never really had that period, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see her joy and her freedom. She had really distanced herself from a lot of friends that when we moved away.
But Chris, hold it right there. Hold it right there because you hear the music. We're gonna hit the pause button. When we come back, I'm gonna have you pick up because where you said she was just diagnosed properly, and then now you started to see that light at the end of the tunnel, that relief. But then the story continues, folks. So you got to stay tuned in for this wonderful pre-recorded broadcast with our amazing guest, Chris Faddis. We'll be right back. We're so glad you tuned in to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Jerry will be back on our next live broadcast. This is a pre-recorded special episode with our guest, Chris Faddis, and he is telling us the details of his journey with his late wife, Angela. So we hope you are really listening intently. You are taking it all in because we can only pray, hopefully, and we can pray about this, that you will walk away from this broadcast a little bit changed, a little bit closer to God, more trust for God, and maybe you'll look at suffering in a different way. Okay, and that's what Take Two's all about. So before we get back with our great conversation with Chris Faddis, let me just share with our listeners Church Pop and the emails that can come into your email inbox about Church Pop. Church Pop takes a fresh and fun look at the news shaping our world, featuring engaging, inspiring, and informative Catholic social media content. Find it on Snapchat, Instagram, and the web at churchpop.com. And you can get Church Pop directly in your email inbox. That's what I do. Visit EWTN.com and click on subscribe. Okay, Chris, we're just going to have you rewind just a little bit, and then, but highlight again, because I think sometimes when people struggle with depression, Chris, you may or may not know this, but Jerry and I are both life coaches. We have the ministry Stand Tall, which, by the way, folks, you can find us at standtalltoday.com. But Chris, when life coaching, when folks are dealing with depression, it is so important to find that doctor that can properly diagnose and maybe change your eating habits, add some supplements, some medication or whatever, because you do want to have your best life. And so it sounds like Angela found that right medical professional to help her, and now you were seeing some bright spots.
Yeah, it was really amazing. And it's certainly not to say there were certainly situations in our lives, in her life, that were part of the symptoms of the depression. But ultimately, it was all tied to a nutritional deficiency, and the ability to deal with and cope with those difficult situations was affected by that, and it was leading her to these really difficult, dark places. And ultimately, once she found that physician who had the ability to say, wait a minute, I think I'm seeing a pattern here. I'm seeing something going on. Let's try this. And right away, we saw an improvement. It was such a gift, and it was a gift of God, because we had been praying for time and again for a healing for her, because it was so difficult. And at the same time, Debbie, I will say, during that time of depression, the one thing I will say that Angela started to do is she started to say to me in her deepest parts, I can't say the words right now, but I need you to pray with me. And we would pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And she would say, you say the words, because I can't. And as we would pray that prayer, and we would get towards the end of the chaplet, Angela would start to pray along. And by the end, when we would pray, Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great mercy commit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. That's when Angela would just start belting the prayer, and I knew that God had gotten through her through that time. And so this was just an answer to prayer, that we found this nutritional deficiency. She was better. We had this 3 months of grace. And then at the very end of that, at the end of that 3 months, it was right towards Easter of that year, 2011, Angela started to have severe digestive issues. And long story short, just to kind of get to the next part of the story, Debbie, that Easter Sunday, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And we had experienced this incredible grace for this 3 months. And I think in a way, the Lord was giving us that little bit of grace to prepare us for this next phase, also knowing that Angela needed to be healed from that depression in order for her to have the strength and the courage she needed to face a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, which came on Easter Sunday of 2011.
Chris, let me ask you a question. I could hear how you got emotional when you even, just shared that again. And it's been, over 10 years. Let me ask you this question. How does a healthy she was young and healthy, and you had your kids. How do you get to stage 4? That's pretty extreme. Were you thinking, hey, we need to do another test or something? Something's wrong here.
Yeah, we definitely, it was pretty obvious from the imaging, but we were admitted right away to the hospital. But yeah, it was very surprising, especially because she was a healthy woman. She was eating healthy. She cared about organic food. She didn't drink soda. She didn't eat fast food very often, right? She really had a healthy lifestyle even before we met. In fact, when we were dating, my friends made fun of me because all of a sudden I became healthy Chris, right? Because when you're falling in love, the man often makes life changes for the woman, right? And it was very surprising that this would happen. And when you think about now, I think, especially working in the medical world now, we're seeing more and more of young people get colon cancer. And at the time, they said, oh, this is so rare. But the thing is, colon cancer is slow moving. She'll fight it off. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. We're seeing now that there is an aggressive form of colon cancer that's hitting younger adults. And so, more and more people are facing this diagnosis. But it was honestly surprising even to the doctors. Many of the doctors we worked with had never seen someone this young with colon cancer. And especially this far advanced. It wasn't just Debbie and her colon. It was a full blockage of her colon. She had to have she had lesions all over her liver, and they thought there might be lesions in other places, but it was so advanced it wasn't worth biopsying every area, right? So that was it was a big shock for sure.
So when you received this diagnosis, and then what can you share with us if it's not too personal? I know a lot of this, the details of this is in the book, but can you share with us what was your first conversation with her? What was it like when you saw the images? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that first conversation, we had been being told by the doctors, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. They'd actually sent me and the kids home at one point. And then I got called back, and I didn't even realize when I got called back that there was a reason. We walked in, and honestly, in a shaky voice, this young resident said, it's colon cancer, and essentially they were saying it's really late, and and you know me, Debbie, and I've been on your show before, so your listeners know, I'm not short for words, right? Normally I'm able to come up with something to say, and I had nothing. I couldn't. And Angela just looked at me from that bed, and with a look of both a smile and sad eyes, she said, it was Easter Sunday, so it's a reminder that this was Easter Sunday. She said, Jesus still rose, so we will trust. We're going to trust. He still rose. And that was those words were the marching orders for me, that this is how we're going to face this news. We're going to trust him. And I think all of those Divine Mercy chaplets, all of those times of her praying when she couldn't feel like praying or when she asked me to say the words for her, all of those came to this point where she was able to have this moment of absolute sheer trust in God. Jesus still rose.
Wow. Wow. I don't know if you heard that bell sound, but my computer, there was a bell that went off as soon as you just shared, Jesus still rose, so we will trust. Angela's words, I don't know if you heard it, but it almost went off like it was like scripted. Take
Wow.
that.
I did hear it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So is that amazing or what? I mean, where do we hear stuff like that, or how does that happen? Is it just a coincidence, or is God trying to share with us that He's pleased about this conversation? We don't know. I guess we'll never know until the other side. But I will tell you, Chris, that was pretty amazing. That I could feel the Holy Spirit. So Angela had the grace, the trust, the faith to say, Jesus still rose, so we will trust. So she immediately went to trust when most people would go to what? Anger, denial, all the stages?
Yeah, all of the things, right.
How did she do it? How did she do it, Chris?
Yeah, I think it just comes back to it's all about this habit forming prayer, right? That even in those darkest moments, she would say to me, when she was depressed, she would say, I know God loves me. I know that He loves me. I believe it. I trust it because I know that's what I know to be true. I've been taught. I've learned this, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it inside. I feel empty inside. And so in those moments when she had the depression, she would feel that way. She would pray through it, right? And either asking me to pray or forcing herself to pray. And I think that habit, that habitual prayer, that praying through suffering, that praying in the storm, trusting God in the storm, it welled up in her soul, and that was one of the reasons why I named the book It Is Well, is after the song, the hymn, It Is Well, which is, the idea that whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well, it is well with my soul. That's a welling up within. That's not an act of the will. That's an ability from within because you know the Lord, because you've regularly trusted the Lord even when it was hard. And that's the only how I can understand, was that the Lord prepared her for this through her acts of faith all the years before.
In life coaching, Chris, we talk about, how you hear the saying, practice makes perfect, right? Well, in life coaching, we say practice makes permanent. And, that the habits we have in building up that trust and confidence with God. You said you went multiple times a day to church and you were praying a lot with Angela, and all this grace was building up, right? And so the practice that you were constantly in that habit of connecting with God, which what Blessed Carlo Acutis talks about a lot, this connection with God. The Eucharist was his highway to heaven. He was in constant connection. That helped because when she was faced with this, you talk about a very extreme, diagnosis. There's not much left at that point. Like, which way do you go when you have stage 4 colon cancer? There's not many options on the table there of what to do. wow, she had to be prepared. So I agree with you. I completely affirm I've seen it in my own life. So in a smaller way, but I can only imagine that had to have tremendously helped Angela. And then, of course, it helped you as her spouse. How old was Angela when she was diagnosed?
She was 31.
31.
31. Yeah.
And
so we had two children at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Our daughter Gianna was turning 4 a couple days later after her diagnosis, and our son Augustin was about a year and a half old.
Wow. I want to talk about that as well. The fact that she was so young and having 2 children, you guys just starting out your family, how that impacted the kids, how it impacted you. I mean, there had to have been a point, Chris, where you felt helpless. What could you do? I mean, and you're a fixer. I know. I've known you way back in the youth ministry days. You fix everything. I mean, you share a little bit about that. Did you get support yourself? Did people of who had a lot of experience in this, did they step up to help you, Chris, or were you pretty much alone kind of fighting this?
Yeah, in a way we weren't alone for sure. I mean, we had people all around us. We were living away from both of our families at the time, so we didn't have family around us, but we had a great community in our parish and people we had gotten to know in that diocese and that area, and they came together, and also just the Catholic community from around the country. Like you mentioned, being in youth ministry for so many years, you make friends around the country. And so there was just this groundswell of support. Our good friend Melanie Pritchard put up a Facebook page right away, and that was what you did back then to get the news out, right? You just put up a Facebook group or a page, and people from all over the country started coming together to pray for us. But there was a sense of loneliness in the sense that at the same time, I'm the only one who's going through this particular thing at this moment. There were certainly people who had lost a spouse or been through this, in different ways. But there was at the same time this sense of, and it's probably coming from my own sense of always having, like you said, to solve problems, of really having to learn to trust, and having to learn to take other people's advice and not know the answer and be able to absorb that, but also knowing that Angela was not a conventional person. So some of the advice was very conventional, and it wasn't necessarily what she wanted, right? It wasn't necessarily what she saw as what God wanted for her. And some of that even had to do with the type of treatment we would get or the type of, care we would get. And we had to, really, really weigh a lot of options. But there were amazing people every step of the way that were sort of acted as whether or not people that informed us or taught us, but also people who really helped us to see what was possible, what was coming, Of course, stage 4, I had at the time only known one person who had stage 4 cancer, and they died in 2 months. So in my mind, we had a very short amount of time, but none of the doctors would tell us how much time we had. But we also knew that we had to fight in a way. And I don't even think, Debbie, Angela didn't like the term fight cancer. And I still to this day don't love that. I think Angela saw this as an opportunity for God's grace. I mean, early on, she said, the Lord is going to use this to purify me. The Lord is going to help me become more holy through this cancer, right? She saw it as an opportunity. But we also knew we weren't going to give up on fighting against the cancer medically, right? And so we had to really do a lot of researching, phone calls and conversations. But every step of the way, the Lord provided helpers and guides to help us through that.
Wow, what a journey. And we want to talk about your children. They were so young at the time and losing their mother. So we want to talk about that on the other side of the break. And then we want to move into, you got into Solidarity HealthShare, an amazing group. We're going to talk about that. So you got to stay with us, folks, on this pre-recorded broadcast of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie with our guest, Chris Faddis. We're having an amazing discussion with Chris Faddis, our guest, for this incredible pre-recorded broadcast that was put together by our producer, Ace McKay, who does just a fine job getting in touch with all of our guests and getting them lined up for the interviews. I mean, he is incredible. So thank you, Ace McKay. Jerry Usher will be back on our next live broadcast. But right now, let's get back to our conversation about Chris's journey with his beautiful wife, Angela. She passed from colon cancer in 2012. Chris wrote a book about their journey, but at the time when Angela was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, Chris, you had a young daughter, a young son. What did you share with them, and how much of it did they grasp?
Yeah, I mean, it was very hard. Obviously, our daughter being almost 4 at the time, it was a little easier for her. They were with me at the hospital. When we first got the diagnosis, they were with nurses while we did that. But, we just talked about Mommy being really sick initially, and you just slowly but surely talk about what it means, And really, it comes to a head as you get closer. I mean, Angela ended up living 17 months after her diagnosis. And so as the kids get older and as we got closer, those conversations happen naturally. I remember, about 6 months in, I remember Angela had been really sick and in the hospital for several days. And, Gianna said to me, Daddy, is Mommy going to die? And so that began that, the thing I had been taught, I had asked several, of course, different people that were counselors or social work, they would give you advice on how to handle this. And then the advice was to let the kids lead the conversation. So as they ask questions, you answer honestly, but with prudence, obviously. And so I just said, well, Gianna, we don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all going to die one day, but Mommy is really sick, and she could die from this. But right now, we don't think she's going to die right now, and we think we're going to keep treating her and hoping the medicine will help her, and also praying for a miracle, And you just have to slowly have those conversations. And what I've learned with my children is that over time, you answer the question at the most basic level, and then they'll keep asking until they're done. They're not ready to hear the next part, and that's kind of what happened throughout the journey. And so, that became a normal part of our lives to be a conversation. But what's interesting for me, Debbie, was that it actually taught me an important lesson, which I hope I still practice today with my children, but is that, we can't shield our children from suffering. That it's actually doing them a disservice to not let them know that suffering is possible and that bad things do happen in life. But those bad things, even those bad things, can be graces of God, that they can turn good, and that we can get grace from those bad things, or we can offer them up, right? It actually taught me that I cannot shield my kids from the bad. And that's an important thing, I think, that we forget about because we live in this American society where we're constantly trying to shield ourselves and our children from bad things, right? And it's an important lesson, I think, that I learned in that. But the kids really absorbed and handled things so very well. And I will tell you, people always want to know, they're both teenagers now. Gianna's 16. Augie, we call him, is going to be 14 in just a few weeks. Mm-hmm. They're incredible, incredible children that God has absolutely had his hand on their lives and protected them and guided them. And there's been so much grace in their lives.
Well, I have to tell you, Chris, since I know your family, you don't have to convince me on your daughter and your son, your first daughter, your son, because I think they're amazing. But then you now have 5 children to get all together, and all of your kids are amazing. When I see you at church, I love watching your family with your beautiful wife, Jennifer. You have the most, just the sweetest kids, and they all have a very unique personality. It is so fun to watch, Chris, because I've known you for so many years. So you're very blessed. I mean, you were blessed with the 2 that you had with Angela, and then the 3 with Jennifer. I mean, your family is just incredible. I think you know that, though, because you have one of those, it's kind of like the Brady Bunch type families. You just watch them and you think, these kids are really cool.
I always tell people, they all got all the grace and beauty of their moms and all the vices of their dad. So they all, we're all very, very hardcore, and we like to, get our way and all those things. But it's been such a gift, and they've been such grace. And I will say too, Debbie, you're talking about moments that give you chills. I met a man last week, and he was asking me about my now wife, Jennifer, or about my situation. And he said right away, he stopped. He said, "Wait a minute, I feel like the Holy Spirit just told me something." He said, "Your first wife is the one who sent you your second wife." did they know each other? I said, well, no, they actually didn't. I told them. But my mom, several friends of ours all felt like Angela is the one who prayed for Jen to be the kid's new mom and my wife. And God his grace has been through this marriage all throughout. It's been such a gift.
Right. Oh, I would totally affirm that as well. That's pretty amazing. So let's go to the most difficult part of the last couple days. Can you share without, I don't want this to be too hard on you in any way, shape, or form, but whatever you can share with our listeners, some of the takeaways, some of the things you learned, some of the things you experienced in those final precious moments with Angela.
Yeah, I mean, Angela was, but by summer of 2012, that July, she started to really experience what is typical of cancer patients, where they start to have reasons why they have to stop treatment and different infections or fluid leaking, all these different things happening, fluid buildup, sorry. And, we kind of started to see that it was coming to the end. In fact, Angela started to have night terror kind of dream episodes where she was realizing she was, essentially almost seeing her death in a way and going through these periods, which are common if you read about hospice and palliative care. These are common parts of the journey. And so I sort of knew before this happened. In fact, she had one dream where her dad came to see her, but he was too late. And so the next day I said, do you want me to call your dad? She said, yes. I called her dad and I said, you need to get on a plane. And her dad came, a few days later. And he was able to be here for the last 3 weeks of her life. But she saw it coming. In the end, her biggest fear was giving up. When we decided to go home for hospice care, she didn't want to go home because she felt like she'd be giving up and going home to die. And I said, well, let's go home to live. Let's go home and live the best life you can for as long as you can. And they've said some people bounce back. You never know, and so we did that. And she was grateful for that and had that time. She was very concerned that she wasn't holy enough, and she asked God to make her holy. And I really think God extended her life a few weeks for that purpose. She went through great suffering those last few weeks, but that suffering, Debbie, became such a gift because thousands and thousands and thousands of people were praying for Angela for a healing, miraculous healing in those last few weeks. And what was happening is they were experiencing healings in their lives. Miraculous healings. I mean, beautiful, miraculous. I believe miraculous. Certainly not necessarily defined by the church, but I believe miraculous healings were happening in people's lives by praying for Angela. And when I would talk to her and say, man, all these people are praying for you, they're sending notes, and I would read them to her, and she would say, I have a lot of people to pray for when I get to heaven. And she knew these people were praying for her. She wasn't surprised by some of the words that they would share about the miracles that were happening. She nodded as if she knew, And in the end, she went through a very difficult couple of days of I think, great suffering. I felt like my good friend Father John Parks was there at his bedside, and I said, I feel like this is some sort of last battle. And he said, it is. It's a battle for her soul, and we just need to pray. And so we sat there and we prayed and prayed. And that last night, her breathing finally changed, and I sat up from 3 a.m. until the morning, but she didn't pass. And when the kids woke on September 21st, 2012, the kids woke up. They wanted to go down and eat. I said, they could say, give Mommy a kiss, because I don't know if she's going to be here much longer. And Gianna kissed her on the forehead. And as soon as she did, Angela breathed her last breath. And I knew that she waited for them, but I also knew that battle was over, Mm-hmm. And it was just such an amazing thing to watch, to witness the suffering, but also to witness these tremendous moments of joy in it, times where you could tell she could see heaven, she could see angels or saints or something. God was really working. I mean, our house became a holy ground. It truly was, to me, still some of the most beautiful spiritual experience I've ever had.
Wow. The veil was so thin, the way you describe it. This is why, Chris, you need a co-host at this time, because I'm so emotional right now. I'm trying to gather my thoughts and continue the conversation. But, I'm very visual, so I can just picture Gianna kissing her mom and then Angela letting go at that point of this world, right? And moving on to the next. Anything after her passing, did you notice, or did you feel, or did the kids feel? I know your son was too little, but how about Gianna or yourself or anyone else that was there at her bedside? Did anyone else experience anything?
Yeah, I mean, definitely even before she passed, again, those last few days, everyone who came to the house would leave saying, I thought I came to pray for her, but she ministered to me, and those things. And our kids too. I mean, there was this genuine innocence in them that, Gianna, I remember saying, I'm not going to be sad that my mom died because she's supposed to go to heaven, Mm-hmm. And I remember Augie that first night, there was a hospice bed in our master bedroom that Angela had been in, most of the time at the end, and the bed had been taken away. And Augie, we went to go to bed, and they were going to sleep with me that night. And I went in there and in the room, and he was sitting in that spot where the bed was.
Oh.
And I said, "What's going on? I want to pray here." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I want to be here." And I said, "Okay." So we prayed, and I said, "Is this because this is where Mommy was?" He says, "Yeah, I want to be with Mommy." And he knew there was something special there. But, the reality was that I didn't have any true experiences of Angela, necessarily any consolation. But we had other people. I remember just a few days later getting an email from a friend saying, "Hey, somebody asked me to send this to you." It was a woman I didn't even know here in Scottsdale who knew the story because of our friend and was following, and said, "Please send this to Chris. I think this is for him." And she had this experience in adoration where she heard a woman's voice say, "Tell him it's all joy. Tell him it's all joy." And she couldn't, she wasn't sure who it was for. She was praying and praying. And then she watched a video of Angela that someone had shared, and she heard her voice, and she knew it was her. And that was actually the day, I believe it was actually the day of the funeral that I got that message. And we had many, many messages like that of other people experiencing that. And then just there were so many graces at the funeral of just incredible, incredible moments where you just knew the Lord was there, the Holy Spirit was there, and maybe, in fact, Angela was there. That I truly feel like, a priest friend who was her confessor said, I truly believe she served her purgatory on earth, and, maybe she's in heaven. And, of course, I still pray for her soul, but we believe that maybe God took her already, right? And at that moment, there was just so much grace, even in her burial, in the way that the flowers dropped on the casket, and there were people who had dreams of Angela's getting a shower of roses from Therese that reminded them of that. And, there was so many of those graces that happened. And then, again, more healings that came just in the days, and miracles just in the days after she died.
So you decided to write the book, It Is Well, Life in the Storm. And folks, you can find this wonderful book and Chris's journey with Angela at EWTNRC.com. It's right there. It's available. I would highly recommend it. You decided to write the book to put this all in the book, the details of this conversation that we're having. And by the way, Chris, we're probably going to have you back for a part 2, because as you were sharing some of the details of your story, I have a million more questions and not enough time. It is so typical of this show. It goes very fast. So if you can come back for a part 2, that would be great. But I'll try to squeeze in some more questions right now for our listeners, because I know they're probably going to send us emails saying, "Why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that?" So you're going to have to get the book, folks. It Is Well, Life in the Storm. But Chris, let me just hit the pause button right there and share with our listeners just another wonderful program that we really think folks should tune in and check out. And then when I come back to you, Chris, please, we're going to have to make this kind of awkward transition to Solidarity HealthShare. And what I mean by awkward is I don't like to take away anything about Angela's journey. And I think there's so much more we need to talk about. But I do want to get into how you really, this gave birth to, I believe, a beautiful nationwide ministry. So we want to talk about that so other folks can understand it better and maybe participate in Solidarity HealthShare. So let me just share with our listeners first. We just want to highlight the programs just for you. EWTN Live with Father Mitch Pacwa, Wednesday night, 8 Eastern Time on EWTN Radio and TV. Father Mitch interviews a variety variety of guests. And tomorrow, Father Mitch welcomes Monica Jablonska. And she's talking about spreading the legacy of peace started by John Paul II. Wow, that's going to be a great episode of EWTN Live with Father Mitch Pacwa. Okay, so I don't want to take anything away from Angela's journey, but tell us, I mean, I believe it really gave birth to this nationwide ministry. Wouldn't you say, Chris? I mean, I've been a part of Solidarity HealthShare for many years. I think what you're doing is phenomenal, and it's really a testament to your faith and really what you've been through.
Yeah, the Solidarity HealthShare thing really came out of nowhere for us in a way. I mean, this wasn't something I planned on, but there were two things really that led to this. One was that, part of Angela's journey includes, and when I talk about it in the book, having to raise a significant amount of money for her care to get her some advanced and alternative treatments that we needed in order to keep her alive because the traditional route wasn't working. And that was part of it. I had this sense that, wow, how do we help other people in this way? And then the other piece, of course, is that the Affordable Care Act mandates came out in 2012. And we, as Catholics, many of us, I was one of many of you who was having those conversations. What are we going to do? And the bishops were saying we're not going to comply, but what's the solution? And it was a Pentecost Sunday novena that led myself and one of my co-founders, Dr. John Ertley, to both come back to the table and say, we've got to talk about this solution, and what is it? Could it be health sharing? Could it be something else? And really, that's where this began, was this idea that, hey, we can serve people in the way that the community served us, by people, helping each other with their medical bills and getting each other the care they need, praying for each other, and have a much better experience than insurance in that sense. But also that we can also solve this big ethical, moral dilemma that we were in. And what it's really become is a ministry where, we've now had over 46,000 members, Debbie, that we've been able to serve and who share each other's medical expenses. But in addition to that, while we're doing this very practical thing of healthcare sharing and helping people get medical care and make sure their bills are shared by other members and all of those things, we're also doing a very, very important thing, which is the work of mercy, of praying for them, serving them, making sure they have support from their parish if they're going through a medical crisis, making sure they have grief support if they've lost somebody, if they've had a miscarriage or a stillbirth, doing all of these things that are ultimately at the very center of our faith and Catholic social teaching and understanding of how we should treat each other. And it's been such a gift. I mentioned to you off air that we have a chapel just 30 feet from my office where adoration is happening right now. And every day there are staff members who are in there praying by name for our members who are in need. And it is just a beautiful gift and witness, I think, to what I learned from Angela, but also what God brought us through, that the church together, we can support each other, pray for each other, help each other temporally, and ultimately help lead each other to heaven in a very practical way.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have to convince me on that, Chris, again, because I will tell you, I've been very impressed with Solidarity HealthShare, and I will tell you, I agree with you. Your folks that are part of the ministry, they care. It's very obvious they care because I've had conversations with them, and they really know me, and they know what I'm going through, and they're praying for me, and I love going back and forth like that, where somebody really can understand in a faith-based way. They say you only know a person as much as they know God. And so it's so interesting when you work with the fine folks at Solidarity HealthShare. It is a ministry. It's incredible. Chris, how can folks participate if they wanted to sign up or join the group?
Yeah, definitely just visit us at solidarityhealthshare.org. Or call us at 844-313-4999. We've got a great group of people who are also wonderful, faithful Catholics like you that want to help you see if this is the right decision for you. Mm-hmm. But at the website, you'll also get all the information about how it works and what's shareable and what's not shareable, and get some of the stories of some of our members. There's lots of great testimonials that will help you see why it's such a wonderful program.
Oh, yeah. You guys do a great job, all of you. Fabulous. Okay, so my takeaways from this conversation and your journey with Angela, Well, first of all, Chris, I don't know if I ever told you this. I love the fact that her name is Angela. Okay, because you know that I have a strong devotion to the angels. So you would know that immediately she won my heart just with her name, Angela. So that's number one. Number two, when you said that she viewed the diagnosis and then the seriousness of the situation and how terminal it was, she viewed it as an opportunity for the graces and for what she can experience and to be transformed for holiness. That final period of time, which is very intense, very extreme, of an amazing, and I love how you said it, opportunity, how she said it. So that is incredible. And I wish, and I pray that folks, that's their takeaway as well, is this idea that when we're faced with these very hard things that come at us from, different medical professionals that tell us, oh, you've got this and you only have this long to live, we don't automatically go to that place of turning away from God or getting really angry or anything. And I know we have to go through the stages, but we view it the way Angela did, that it's an opportunity for an abundance of grace. Chris, I cannot thank you enough. This was golden. Let me, in the final couple minutes we have with this, in this wonderful conversation and pre-recorded broadcast of Take Two, share with us what you would want our Take Two family to know, or their takeaway, or what you want them to be inspired about, or whatever you feel, just come from the Spirit. But I really and truly believe that the good Lord is letting Angela hear this conversation.
I think she's speaking, hopefully through my words, but also through the witness of her story every day, which is such a gift. And I would say, the biggest thing I can say is, for one, you just said, Debbie, you've got to see it as an opportunity for grace, but do not leave the sacraments, because it's the sacraments that force you to look up and see the grace, right? And so that's an important part of the puzzle that meant everything for Angela and I during this time. But also, before she died, she said something when her doctor said, look, you're coming to the end, you're in your last few days. I remember my mom went to see her, and she said, how are you feeling about that? She said, well, my doctor said that I'm almost done. And my mom said, oh, how are you? And she said, I'm okay with it, but I want the world to know, I just want the world to know that no matter what, they must trust in Jesus. And so I'll leave you with those words. No matter what is going on in your life, no matter what you're facing, no matter what you're dealing with, remember Angela's words. No matter what, you must trust in Jesus.
Wow. Thank you, Chris, so very much for making time. You're a very busy guy running a nationwide organization with Solidarity HealthShare. Folks, you got to check it out, please. Also, pick up Chris's life story with Angela. It is well, Life in the Storm. Amazing. Chris, thank you so much. We will have to continue this. I have another million questions to ask you. But it's a good thing that Ace McKay, our wonderful producer, has your cell phone number. So maybe we could schedule you for a part 2. Okay?
Would love it. God bless you, Debbie. God bless your listeners.
Thank you, Chris. Great conversation we had today with Chris Faddis. This is a pre-recorded broadcast of Take Two. Now, folks, please share this episode far and wide on social media. That's a good use of social media. Please share it. Very, very important. That's the reason why we do these wonderful new content episodes for you, so that you can learn and grow and then share it. Okay. Send it to a friend. Obviously listen to it first, make sure it's appropriate, because if somebody is going through a serious illness, you might not wait for that perfect time to send it. But please do share it on social media. Also, don't forget to like us on Facebook, Jerry and Debbie Facebook page. We're constantly updating now about Jerry's journey back into seminary for priestly ordination. We love this journey that we get to be on with Jerry into the seminary, and hopefully one day we get to all visit him when he's a priest in Florida. So isn't that going to be wonderful? So that's at Jerry and Debbie Facebook page. We'll give you updates. Also, you can email Jerry at seminaryjerry@gmail.com if you want to send a personal note to him, seminaryjerry@gmail.com. Okay, and then the last bit of housekeeping, please, if you found some interesting things about this conversation that we had with Chris Faddis and about what it means to really embrace all of life's situations, and you get the health diagnosis, you're not sure how to live your best life, please visit us at standtalltoday.com, standtalltoday.com. We have just a wonderful panel of life coaches that can help you navigate this thing called life. Okay, so that'll do it. You hear the beautiful music. We love the Take Two family. Again, thanks to Ace McKay for setting up this incredible recorded broadcast. And we want to say to our Take Two family, have a beautiful and blessed day. We'll see you real soon.